Welcome to this episode of Stitchy Snippets, where I'm going to chat about how tight your fabric needs to be if you put it in a hoop or frame for cross-stitching. Hi there Stitchy friends, I'm Kat from Catkin and Lillie, bringing you all the best tips, tricks and tutorials so you can learn more about all things stitchy, grow your stitching skills and get the most joy from your stitching. I have lost track of how many times I've heard cross-stitchers say that if you put fabric in a hoop or frame to stitch with, that it must be drum tight, i.e. stretched like a drum skin so you could bounce a coin off it. I am here to tell you that you don't, and that there is also a potential pitfall with doing this. Of course, if you put your fabric into a hoop or frame stretched taut, you like it that way, and you never have any problems with it, then I am not suggesting that you change what you do. But if you struggle to get it really tight, or feel like you're doing it wrong because you don't have it super tight, then I want you to know that that's okay. If you're going to put your cross stitch in a hoop as a way to finish it for display, then yes, I do think it will look its best pulled really tight, so the fabric and your stitching is beautifully flat. And don't forget to wash and iron your finished piece before you do this. If you want to know how I recommend to do that, then take a look at this video, which you can find linked in the description. But today I'm only talking about when you put your fabric in a hoop or frame for the process of stitching on it. So where did this idea that fabric must be drum tight to cross stitch on originate, since it is such a commonly held belief? Well, I couldn't find anything definite, but I wonder if it may have come from doing embroidery, where it seems that having the fabric drum tight in a hoop really is helpful, as it can avoid fabric puckering. Cross stitch is a form of embroidery, so perhaps it's natural that we would assume the same to be true. And to be fair, there are good reasons to have your fabric be at least fairly taut in a hoop or frame. As a side note, you also don't have to use a hoop or frame at all to cross stitch, and I've made several videos about the benefits of stitching in hand and tips for doing this. So I'll link those in the description if you're curious. But many cross stitchers do find stitching in a hoop or frame is much easier, and the main benefit is that having the fabric pulled a bit tighter can open up the holes and make them easier to see and find with your needle. It can also give a consistent tension, which can help your stitches look neat and even. And yes, it can avoid fabric puckering compared with stitching in hand. These are all fantastic benefits. But you can achieve all of that without stretching your fabric taut to within an inch of its life. And remember that potential pitfall that I mentioned? Well, when you pull fabric super tight, you run the risk of overstretching the fabric and even distorting the weave of the fabric, which could then result in distorted or wonky stitches, especially if you don't take the fabric out of the hoop or frame in between stitching sessions, so that it stays stretched out of shape for a long time. You may well find that the fabric weave and stitching settle back into a regular shape when you do take it out of the hoop or frame, and especially if you wash and press it. But there is a very small risk that it will stay wonky. This very much depends on both your fabric and the type of hoop or frame, as it's much easier to distort softer fabrics with more delicate weaves like linen, and to a lesser extent even weave, whereas Aida holds its regular grid structure better even when pulled really tight. And it's much easier to get fabric nice and straight in a snap frame, as you have the straight edges of the frame to work off. And the same goes for plastic nurge hoops, as they're rectangular. And scroll frames would also be less problematic, because it's harder to pull the fabric really wonky when loading it onto a scroll frame. Embroidery hoops are probably the most difficult when it comes to getting the fabric to sit straight without distorting the weave. All that said, I think that although fabric warping is a potential issue, I think it's probably fairly easy to minimise or avoid if you're careful when putting your fabric into the hoop or frame. So I would say the main benefit to not trying to get your fabric drum tight is just the faff involved to pull it really, really tight. For those with reduced hand mobility, dexterity or strength, then this simply might not be possible. Even with no specific hand problems, I find it pretty painful to try and pull the fabric really, really tight, and it's unnecessarily time consuming. Of course, if you're going to use a hoop or frame, then I'm not suggesting you leave the fabric all floppy and sagging, as This negates the advantages of having the hoop or frame in the first place and would be pretty difficult to work on. But you absolutely can just pop the fabric in, pull it so it's just flat, and then away you go. No need to spend ages tightening and tightening unless you prefer it that way. That also means it's really quick and easy to do, so you can easily take your fabric out of the hoop or frame at the end of each stitching session and put it back in again when you come to stitch on it again. This might seem like a nuisance, but it can hugely reduce the risk of getting hard creases in your fabric that can be really tricky to remove when the piece is completed. If you make it easy to do by not trying to have the fabric drum tight each time, then it makes it much less of a chore to do. I hope you found this useful and possibly liberating. I want to encourage you to cross-stitch in the way that's easiest and most comfortable for you. And yes, to dispel some of the common myths around cross-stitching. If you enjoyed this video, then please do give it a like and make sure to subscribe to my channel for loads more stitchy tips and tutorials, which will also ensure they can reach and help more cross-stitchers. Thank you so much for watching. Happy stitching, and bye for now.